was, you know what I mean? And she was there one minute and the next she wasn't. So they searched into our house probably 11 times. I don't know. It really hurt. The whole thing has really hurt me and kind of a lot, but we're still hanging in there for our kids and trying to do what's right. And holding out hope that someone will be found.
Moments ago, investigators returned to the 3500 block of Van Hill Road, the same rural area police quietly visited earlier this month. And tonight, we finally know why they went back. Because according to officials close to the case, this location may hold the first promising lead in months for the investigation into Summer Wells. Missing since June 2021, this development doesn't just reopen the timeline, it challenges what we thought we knew about where the truth might be. Stay with me, because the details police confirmed today explain why this property matters, why they checked again, and why investigators are expanding their search zone instead of closing it. Before we break down the new activity, here's the grounded recap, expanded and strengthened to more than 300 words as you requested. Summer Wells disappeared on June 15, 2021, from her home on Ben Hill Road in Hawkins County, Tennessee, a quiet, rural area surrounded by woods, steep terrain, and long, winding roads. What happened in the minutes between when she was last seen and when the 911 call was placed remains one of the most intensely examined mysteries in modern Tennessee history. From the earliest hours, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation made it clear that this was not going to be an ordinary missing child case. They described the search for Summer as one of the most resource-heavy operations they had ever conducted, deploying not only state agents but also federal partners, specialized search and rescue teams, dive units, air support, and K-9 units trained for multiple types of detection. The effort stretched across days, then weeks, then months, with thousands of volunteer hours poured into the hills, hollows, and back roads around the Wells property. Despite all of that manpower, all of that technology, all of that coordination, there was one overwhelming constant. No confirmed sightings of Summer. No verified trail. No physical evidence publicly revealed that explains where she went or what happened. Throughout the years that followed, 2022, 2023, 2024, and now deep into 2025, investigators maintained the same firm stance. They refused to close the case, refused to scale it down, and refused to label it cold. Their repeated message became almost a mantra. The case remains active and ongoing, and that statement matters. Agencies do not keep a file active for this long unless there are leads, tips, or pieces of information that still need to be processed, reviewed, or pursued. It signals movement behind the scenes, movement the public doesn't always see. Which brings us to Van Hill Road, a location roughly 10 miles from the Wells home, where investigators suddenly appeared again. A rural property, outside of Hawkins County, but close enough to be connected. And after days of speculation, we finally understand what brought them there, and why the timing of this renewed activity is so significant. Police have confirmed that agents and deputies returned to the Van Hill Road area because of a newly developed lead connected to information investigators had already gathered earlier in the case. This wasn't a casual revisit or a routine patrol sweep. It was a targeted return triggered by something new that intersected with something old. Investigators emphasized two critical points that completely change how this moment should be understood. First, they made it clear that this wasn't random. Authorities didn't just pick a spot on the map and decide to recheck it. The follow-up was tied directly to a specific tip that investigators had already been evaluating, meaning the new information didn't exist in isolation. It connected to prior data, earlier statements, or previously logged observations. This is significant because tips come in constantly, but only a fraction get cross-referenced with historical case files. When they do, and when something matches closely enough to justify action, it signals a meaningful shift in the investigative landscape. Second, investigators said this lead required physical rechecking, something that cannot be overstated. Not every tip demands boots-on-the-ground follow-up. Many can be dismissed through digital review, interviews, timeline analysis, or database cross-checking. But this one wasn't like that. This lead pointed to something that could only be assessed by standing on the property, walking the terrain, examining structures, and visually confirming or disproving specific details. In cases like this, physical geography matters, Angles, distances, sight lines, access points, and environmental features can reveal or disprove information in ways documents never can. In other words, something in the information provided aligns strongly enough with existing case data that investigators believed it was worth re-examining the area directly, not tentatively, not theoretically, physically, visibly, thoroughly. And that matters because police do not redeploy resources, revisit rural properties, or reopen specific search zones unless the lead carries potential weight. This is exactly the kind of movement investigators seldom make without a reason that suggests the information they received could push the case forward in a way previous tips did not. Investigators also confirmed something else, something subtle but extremely important. They are actively processing new evidence and new digital data connected to recent tips that came in around the same time as the Van Hill Road activity. This may sound like a routine statement, but in a case that has stretched across multiple years, it holds far more weight than it appears to at first glance. What does that mean? It means investigators are not treating what happened on Van Hill Road as a simple check-and-leave situation. They aren't walking away from that location and closing the folder on it. Instead, they are taking the information tied to that lead and running it through every system they have: communications records, tip logs, mapping data, digital submissions from the public, and an internal timeline they've been refining since 2021. It means they are treating the tip that brought them back to that area as credible enough to compare against older statements, older phone records, older GPS data, older interviews, and older movement patterns. When police say they are examining communications, timelines, movements, and past information, they're talking about a deep dive alignment process that involves checking whether the new details match any previously unexplained gaps, whether they contradict earlier accounts, whether they reveal a location someone forgot to mention, whether they introduce a new person, new sighting, or new piece of context investigators didn't have before. This is the kind of work detectives only do when there is a real possibility the new material might shift the case forward. And perhaps the most important part of all, the new information is now part of the official case file. It was not dismissed, not flagged as unreliable, not placed in a long list of tips that lead nowhere. Instead, it was logged, cataloged, and brought into the ongoing analytical process. Anytime investigators publicly acknowledge that new evidence is being analyzed, it tells us something very clear. There's still unanswered questions in this case, still areas that do not add up, and still possibilities that have not been ruled out. It means investigators believe there may be undiscovered evidence, unresolved inconsistencies, or connections that have yet to be revealed. This alone indicates the case is far from cold. This particular stretch of Van Hill Road has surfaced multiple times throughout the investigation, and that alone makes it different from the vast majority of locations that have been checked over the years. It's one of the few areas that has been linked to multiple, unrelated tips coming from different people at different times for different reasons, yet pointing investigators back toward the same general zone. That almost never happens unless there is something about the location that aligns with more than one piece of information already inside the case file. Another reason this area matters is its position relative to what investigators consider important routes and backroads connected to the timeline of June 15, 2021. These are the roads that could realistically factor into movements on or around the time Summer disappeared. Places where someone could travel unnoticed, pull off, loop through, or pass by without attracting attention. Van Hill Road sits within that network of winding East Tennessee backroads that investigators have studied for years. When a location overlaps with known traffic patterns, phone movement zones, or previously analyzed time windows, it automatically becomes more significant. Then there's the terrain itself, rural, wooded, steep, and uneven. This isn't the kind of land you fully clear in a single pass. It's the kind of environment where sight lines are limited, where vegetation changes with seasons, where new growth can hide areas that were once open, and where small details can easily be missed depending on the weather, the tools available, and the conditions on the day of a search. Because of this, investigators sometimes have to revisit certain spots when new information matches a physical feature, a slope, a structure, a path, a distance marker, or even the angle of a driveway or tree line. So when police physically return to this location, not once, but again, years after Summer vanished, it signals something meaningful. It means the lead didn't simply sound interesting. It met internal criteria that investigators use to decide whether a tip deserves another round of boots on the ground. They don't bring agents, deputies, and equipment to a site unless the information suggests there is something they're worth verifying. This may not be the breakthrough everyone hopes for, but it is absolutely not nothing. It represents movement evaluation and a continued belief that certain parts of this case still have not been fully resolved. So, what does this mean moving forward? Here's what we can reliably expect. Police will continue cross-checking the new lead with past statements, prior searches, and digital records. Any inconsistencies in the timeline of any witnesses or individuals may be reevaluated. Additional interviews connected to the Van Hill Road follow-up are likely, even if unannounced. And investigators are clearly signaling one thing. This case is not cold. It is active, evolving, and very much alive. For a case that has stretched over 4 years. That alone is a major development.